In this video, we're going to go over the Symfony Doctrine many-to-many. So let's get started. We're going to first go ahead and start by getting Symfony installed. Symfony 5 just came out, but I haven't used it yet, so we're going to stay with Symfony 4. And we're basically just going to create a skeleton Symfony project. So I'm just going to call it many-to-many. And if you don't know, you can specify the Symfony version with this command above. Okay, so, I paused that so you wouldn't have to wait. Now that the Symfony has installed, let's go ahead and get a virtual server. I'm using Mac, so I'm a fan of Lando, which uses Doctrine or Docker. I'm sorry. I usually just copy and paste from another project and then just change the name. We're just going to create a LAMP recipe. The web's going to be in public, and we're using PHP 7.2. I think 7.3 is out, but I haven't updated my Mac yet. My other Mac's on 7.3. And just go ahead and kick that off. All right, Lando has started, so we should have a basic web server. So let's see if we do. So I'm just going to pull over a browser, grab the site. If you're not using Lando, it's really useful. It's easy to install with Brew. And we are not running for some reason. Okay, it's back up. What I did is I put the Lando configuration file into the wrong path, so forgot when Composer creates the project, I forgot to change it to that directory. So we have basic Symfony up, and I really like how they've changed the look of the splash screen. I never really look at these because I typically just create a controller right away. So let's get started. All right, so I put the project into PHP Storm. So the first thing, let's go ahead and get our database set up. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make our env file. I don't usually do commands, I just create the file. So if you go into create new file, we're going to call it .env.local. I'm just going to copy over from another project, which is pretty much the same thing. All right, so this is the database server, and then just look at our Lando configuration. Whenever you work with Lando, it's a little different with the command line because you have to switch it back and forth. It's annoying, but you get used to it. All right, so we should have a connection now to our database, and we can just verify that by doing Lando MySQL, use LAMP. All right, so we have no tables in there, so let's go ahead and quit out of MySQL. All right, so let's go ahead and create an entity. So we're going to go to our source, entity. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create two tables. One's going to be contacts, and the other one's just going to be jobs. And you'll see that I'm a huge fan of copy and paste. I do not use generators, but I'll explain as I go. It's just how I work. I write a lot of code, so it's just this seems easiest for me. So let's go ahead and just talk about what we're doing here. Um, so obviously your namespace is app entity. I don't think this is going to change in Symfony 5, but I have not tried it yet, so I'm still in Symfony 4. Um, this right here, you typically won't see this because you haven't done many-to-many. So go ahead and add this. This is going to be used for many-to-many. And then here's just your normal ORM mapping for your doctrine. Here's your annotation. Our table name is going to be contacts. I always put a repository in for every entity I create, even if it's a blank repository. It's just good to have so you don't have to worry about it. And then if you do need to use it, then you don't have to go back and modify your entity, create the repository, and then put your queries in there. So it's just good practice just to go ahead and add your repository. And then here's the classes contacts, and that's the base. So let's go ahead and I'm going to create my my fields. So I always use standard code. You can name your IDs anything you want. I typically like to try to keep it something to do with the table. And then we're just going to create just a field. I'm just going to call it name. All right, so here I've created a field that's going to have the database name as name. It's going to be a string and nullable. You have to put data, so it can't be nullables. If you want this to be null, then you have to say false. And that will be the base of your entity. But let's go ahead and take care of our many-to-many. And I'll explain as I do this. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is set up your annotation. You're going to have ORM many-to-many. Your target entity is going to be jobs. That's going to be another entity we're going to create next. So don't worry about that. Just go ahead and put that in there. And then your join table is going to be called contact jobs. Now this table right here, you can call this anything you want. It doesn't matter. For whatever you're doing, just make sure it makes sense to you. And then we're going to be joining the contact ID field, which is going to be into this contact jobs. And then the referencing column is going to be contact ID. So this is the field that's in your contacts table. This is the field that's going to go into the new table that Doctrine is going to manage for you. And then your inverse side is going to be your jobs entity that we haven't created yet. But your invoice column, you're going to call it jobs ID or job ID, and that's going to get created into this contact jobs table. And then you're going to reference the field in your other entity that we haven't created yet, and it's going to be called job ID. But don't worry about that yet because we haven't created the other column, the other entity yet. And then here we've got then you set your variable. So I'm just going to call it contact jobs. Now there's something else you need to do. We need to set up our constructor. So let's go to the top. I don't think it matters where you put it, but I do like to have mine at the top. So the only thing you're going to be doing is you're going to be setting contact jobs, and you're going to basically say it's a new array collection, and this is where this comes into play. And that's really all you need to do to worry about that part. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about getters and setters. Typically, you'd use PHP Storm to generate your getters and setters. So let's go ahead and do that. But we're not gonna generate the ones for the many-to-many because it doesn't know how to do that yet. So I'm just going to do contact ID and name. I'm not going to do contact jobs because it's going to confuse it. All right. So that's in there. Um, Whenever I use PHP Storm, obviously I don't want to set a contact ID because that's going to be auto incremental field, so I'm just going to get that out. So here we got our getter for the contact ID, then we have our getter and our setter for the name. So that's all I'm going to worry about here. And now let's talk about the getter for the many and the setter. So you're not really setting, you're going to be adding. So here we're going to make a public function, and we're just going to call it add contact jobs. What you're going to do is you're going to be passing an object. So we're going to be passing the jobs object, and we're going to give it the variable jobs. Don't worry about this part yet, but I'll talk about it here in a second. And then you're going to say this contact jobs, which is your variable up above, equals $jobs, which is the object that you're passing. Okay. Now the only thing this does is if you try to pass a duplicate, this will basically stop it from inserting, because if you insert a duplicate into with the same person, then you'll get a doctrine error. So this will just avoid errors. That's all this does. And then let's go ahead and set our getter. All right. So now with get contact jobs, all this will do is this will return an array of all the associations in the database for that particular person. So if that person is associated to 5 jobs, this should return an array with 5 items in it. All right, so now let's go ahead and work on our jobs entity. So we're going to go create a new file. We're just going to call it jobs.php. Again, I'm going to copy and paste. This is how I like to work. Again, it's the same similar setup. You notice that we don't have the array collection because it's not needed here. So you got your basic, your namespace. You're using the ORM. Here's your table name and your repository and your class. So let's go ahead and create some fields. All right, so here's our job ID, and then here's our title, which is going to be the title of the job. And then we're going to do our getters and setters, and it's just standard regular getters and setters, so you can just let PHP Storm go ahead and generate all of those. And then we don't need to set the job ID, so we can just get that one out. All right, so that is all in there. So really the only thing left is just doing a database migration. All right, so let's go ahead and close that. And we will open up a terminal. Hopefully we won't have any errors. So we'll run a def first. All right, so far so good. And we'll go ahead and do a migrate. All right, so that was actually pretty successful. Let me slap PHP MyAdmin on real quick. Okay, so I just copied over PHP MyAdmin from another project. So if I go into my database, and then here I can see my contacts and my jobs, and then Doctrine created the contact jobs table, and there's no entity for this because Doctrine is actually going to manage the data and everything inside this this table, so you don't have to worry about it. So just want to show that that was working. All right, so let's go ahead and create a controller. I'm just going to call it home controller, but you can really just call it anything you want. Okay, so here app controller, um, abstract controller. A lot of you, if you're doing older code, you might be calling controller here, which has been depreciated, so now you have to call abstract controller. Just our standard. Here we got route request. We're pulling in our two entities, although I don't really need jobs, so I'm just pull it out. Well, leave it in there. Dang it. And then here's our home controller and extending abstract controller. And then let's just go ahead and create a simple route. So route is going to be slash, and I'm just going to give it a name of home. And then I'm calling my function home action, and I'm passing in the request. Although for this, the request really is not needed, but I'm going to leave it in there. And then just go ahead and make our database connection. And then let's create a simple view. Let's go ahead and create this file. So go into our templates directory, create a new folder, and then we're going to create a file inside there. All right, now if we just say welcome, that should be enough to get it going. So let's go back to the browser. All right, there it is. All right, so let's talk data. So now what we want to do is we want to insert some data. First thing we need to do is we need to insert some data into our job table. We're just going to do it through PHP Miami just because we really don't need to create code for that. Which, I mean, you can easily create your route and go ahead and insert data through Symfony, but I'm just going to go into my jobs table and just insert some data. All right, so we're going to say PHP, Symfony, add some more JavaScript and Java. All right, so if we do a browse, then we've got 4 pieces of data, PHP, Symfony, JavaScript, and Java. So we got our IDs 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so let's do this now. Let's go ahead and grab some data. So job 1, yeah, that's why we want to keep jobs in there so we can reference it. Now I knew that PHP was ID 1 because we just saw that in PHP Miami. So let's go ahead and grab another one, job 2. Okay. So now we know that that's PHP and Symfony. So if I go back to the database, my ID number 1 is PHP and ID number 2 is Symfony. All right. So now this is where we're going to do the many to many. So let's go ahead and start creating a new contact. And we're just going to use our setter. We're going to set a name. So I'm just going to pass in my name. Now, this is where we're going to make the many to many. So here we got contact, add contact, jobs, and we're going to pass in job 1, which is the object that's going to be returned from the jobs class. And if we go back and look at our entity and go to the contacts entity, here in the add jobs, we're passing the jobs object, and then we're going to initiate as $jobs. And then we can pass another one because we created jobs 2. So we're just going to do the same code, and we're just going to pass jobs 2. So now that's going to pass that object into your add contact jobs. And then the only thing we need to do at this point is persist the database and then flush it. Oops. And then go ahead and flush it. All right, so I am not going to do anything more than that. When I go to the web page to refresh it, it's going to do this behind it because I just haven't told it to do anything else. Instead of having to go back and forth, I'm just going to open another tab. Oh, got an error. Look at that real quick. So that error was because we didn't create our repositories. I forgot. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So go to your repository, create a new file. All right, so that's your contacts repository. Now let's go ahead and create our jobs repository. All right, so that is in there. So the error should go away. Let's go ahead and refresh. Oh, okay, so this is a database issue, so I'm actually not connecting right now. So let's look at our environment file. Oh, wrong one. Yes, yeah, I'm still on the one from the command line. So this is where it's a pain in the butt with Lando, but you get used to it. All right, so that is done. So if we go back to our database and let's look at contacts, so you'll see Robert Shaler was added. If we look at the table that Doctrine manages, which is contact jobs, you'll see that it did build the relationship between the two, and it set job ID PHP. There's my guy again, and it set the Symfony. All right, so let's look at pulling this information in so we can actually see it. So I'm just going to close these just so I don't have all these windows open. All right, so let's go back to our controller. We can minimize those. And obviously we won't want to keep writing data every time we refresh, so I'm just going to kill this. All right, so what we want to do is we want to just do a simple test. So let's say contact equals, let's go to our repository, and we're going to pull in the contacts, and then just going to do a simple find. And the ID should be 1 because it's the first record. We can actually verify that just by going back to PHP MyAdmin. Let's go to our contacts, and there it got ID 1. And then all we're going to do is we're just going to send this over to Twig. Now if we go back to Twig, it should still be the same. Okay, that's loaded. All right, so now let's go back to our template. So here it's just pretty basic. But now that we're passing context, we're going to say, let's just say welcome, and we're going to say the name. That should pull up the name. And if you look at your entity, go to your contacts, and then the name. You could also use get name. That would work here. I've seen that with this just a simple small text, then Doctrine doesn't puke, but this always works as well. In fact, let's just go ahead and do it that way. So if we say it that way, if we save, go back to the browser. All right, so there it says Robert Saylor. Now we want to get our many-to-many items, so that's on everybody's question, everybody's mind. How do I get that data? It's really simple. It's going to come into as an array, and it's already being done by Doctrine. So the only thing you really need to do is just loop through an array in Twig. So we're going to do a simple for, I'm just going to say D in contact dot, and we're going to use our getter, get contact jobs, and then N4. Now, just make sure if you go back to your entity, look for your getter, there's your get contact jobs. And then here we're just going to loop through. So we're going to say D dot title. And if you look at your jobs entity, there's your title. And that's all you have to do. So let's go back to the browser. There it is, PHP and Symfony. So you have successfully created a many-to-many, added data to it, and then read data from it. That's pretty much it. It's just like any other relational database, and it doesn't seem that hard.